He built a world where everyone could speak, yet no one truly listens. He promised connection, but gave birth to isolation. In the heart of Silicon Valley stands a man both revered and feared, a quiet figure who rewired how humanity communicates while remaining a mystery himself. Mark Zuckerberg, a name that echoes through every screen, every conversation, every click we make, obey without thinking. The story of Facebook is not just about technology. It's about control, attention, and the fragile thread that binds billions of people together through invisible code. A code written by a young man who never intended to become a god, yet ended up creating a digital universe where he alone holds the laws. From the dorm room in Harvard to the boardrooms of the world, he shaped an empire that defines modern existence and questions it at the same time. He wanted to connect the world, but connection came with a cost. Behind the hoodie and the monotone voice is an obsession to build, to expand, to understand humanity through data and algorithms. But how can one measure emotion in code or friendship in likes? As the platform grew, so did the distance between what he envisioned and what the world became, a network of noise, outrage, and longing. So who is Mark Zuckerberg really? A visionary connecting humanity, or a machine learning how to be human? The answer lies somewhere between the heartbeat and the algorithm, where empathy fades into code and connection becomes currency. And that is where our story begins. Before the empire, before the hoodie, before the world knew his name, there was a boy in a quiet house in Dobbs Ferry, New York. His father a dentist, his mother a psychiatrist. In that house filled with reason and structure, young Mark found his escape not in people, but in patterns. The patterns of logic, numbers, and code. While other children built friendships, he built programs. His first companion wasn't human, it was a computer. At 12, he created a messaging system for his family called ZuckNet, connecting rooms through screens long before he ever dreamed of connecting the world. His father used it in the dental office. His mother sent him reminders from the kitchen. And for the first time, Mark saw how lines of code could replace words, how silence could still communicate. It was power disguised as simplicity. The seed was planted. He didn't seek applause. He sought mastery. Every new line of code was a world he could control. At Phillips Exeter Academy, surrounded by brilliance and privilege, Mark felt both challenged and detached. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the most social. But his mind never stopped running. While others slept, he wrote software. While others joined clubs, he built networks. It wasn't rebellion, it was necessity. The machine spoke the language he understood best. Teachers saw a prodigy. Friends saw an oddity. Mark saw possibilities. He began to imagine a digital reflection of human life, something that could map every relationship, every choice, every thought. Not because he wanted fame, but because he couldn't stop asking, what if I could model the human mind? That question would follow him forever. The boy who once hid behind his computer was learning something profound. Control was comfort. In a world of unpredictable emotions and messy human interactions, computers obeyed. Code didn't argue. Algorithms didn't betray. And if he could build a system powerful enough, maybe he could finally make the world predictable, understandable, safe. But safety has a price. When you control everything, you stop feeling it. In those teenage years between solitude and obsession, Mark's relationship with creation deepened. It wasn't joy, it was compulsion. A quiet, relentless drive that blurred the line between genius and detachment. He wasn't building for fun anymore. He was building because he had to. Every new project was another mirror, another version of himself rendered in binary logic. And deep inside that quiet, calculating boy was a contradiction waiting to explode, and the longing to connect with people through a medium that required no human touch. He didn't know it yet, but the world he would one day create would carry both his brilliance and his blindness. The same lines of code that brought humanity together would one day reveal how far apart we truly are. The roots of obsession had taken hold. And in the dorm rooms of Harvard, they were about to bloom. It began with rejection. A party he didn't attend. A girl who didn't call back. A world that didn't quite see him. In the small, dimly lit dorm room of Kirkland House, Harvard, Mark Zuckerberg sat before a glowing screen, fingers tapping at the keyboard like a pianist lost in his own storm. That night, frustration turned into invention. He wasn't just writing code, he was rewriting how people would judge and be judged. The project was called FaceMash. It compared student photos, asked who was hotter, and within hours, it spread across campus like wildfire. The servers crashed. The administration panicked. Harvard called it unethical. Students called it addictive. And Mark, he called it interesting. It was his first glimpse of power, not over people, but over their attention. He had found the most valuable currency of the 21st century engagement. He was punished, but also awakened. If a crude comparison site could grip an entire campus overnight, what could a network of real identities do? A few weeks later, sitting in that same dorm surrounded by empty pizza boxes and the hum of old Dell computers, Mark typed 4 words that would alter human behavior forever. The Facebook is online. It was February 4, 2004. No grand announcement. No business plan. Just a quiet upload and a world forever changed. The idea was deceptively simple: profiles, photos, connections. But beneath that simplicity was a vision shaped by obsession to digitize the social fabric of life itself. Harvard students joined by the thousands. Then Yale. Then Stanford. The network spread like electricity through wet ground, unstoppable, alive, growing beyond control. He wasn't just coding anymore, he was architecting society. By the time investors began to notice, the walls of that dorm had become too small for his ambition. Enter Eduardo Saverin, the loyal friend and financier. The Winklevoss twins, who claimed he stole their idea. And Sean Parker, the rebel visionary, who whispered to Mark the most dangerous word in business scale. What began as a college experiment became an empire in motion, fast, reckless, hungry. Move fast and break things, he declared. It wasn't just a slogan, it was doctrine. With every new user, Facebook evolved from a social tool into a social mirror, reflecting not just faces but desires, insecurities, and the collective hunger to be seen. Mark watched the numbers rise, the dots of human connection multiply across the screen, and for a moment he felt something close to divinity. He had built a system that could predict influence and record the pulse of an entire generation. But the more the network grew, the less he seemed to belong to the world outside it. Friends drifted away, lawsuits loomed, and the boy who wanted to connect everyone began losing connection himself. In his pursuit of understanding humanity, he had created a system that understood people better than they understood themselves. He didn't just build a website, he built an empire of attention. And as Harvard faded in the rearview mirror, the young founder walked into Silicon Valley not as a student anymore, but as a man who had accidentally invented a new kind of civilization. One built not on borders or beliefs, but on code. The spark in the dorm room had become a wildfire, and soon it would consume the world. From the moment the Facebook left Harvard's walls, it stopped being a college experiment and became a living organism. It breathed, learned, adapted, fed by curiosity, vanity, and the eternal hunger for validation. Every new sign-up was another heartbeat. Every click, another neuron firing inside the expanding brain of a digital species. And at the center of it all stood Mark Zuckerberg, a young architect watching his creation evolve faster than he could comprehend. The mission was simple, almost holy: connect the world. But behind that purity was a brutal logic: growth above everything else. The company's mantra echoed through the rented offices of Palo Alto: move fast and break things. To Mark, breaking meant progress. Mistakes were experiments. Limits were illusions. Each time the servers buckled under the weight of new users, he smiled because chaos meant success. They worked like soldiers in a war no one had fought before, fueled by caffeine, code, and conviction. The algorithm became their compass. It learned who people were, what they liked, who they loved, and what they feared. Every click revealed a truth. Every post fed the system more data. For Mark, it was beautiful, the ultimate map of the human psyche. But power has gravity, and gravity always pulls down. Competitors tried to copy him. MySpace collapsed under its own clutter. Google watched in quiet alarm. Yahoo tried to buy Facebook for $1 billion. Mark was 22. He said no, not out of arrogance but certainty. He didn't want to sell a company. He wanted to shape the future. We don't build services to make money. He said, we make money to build better services. It sounded noble, almost prophetic. But hidden beneath that idealism was the same cold precision that had driven him since childhood, the desire to control every variable. Then came Sheryl Sandberg, the strategist. The balance to his raw instinct. She gave structure to chaos, turning youthful disruption into a corporate machine. With her Facebook learned to monetize connection, to turn emotion into data, and data into gold. Growth was no longer organic, it was engineered. The algorithm was no longer a tool, it was a god. The world joined in waves, students, workers, parents, nations. Governments created pages. Revolutions were organized in comment sections. Birthdays, weddings, protests, elections all streamed through the same blue window. Humanity had found its new mirror, and Mark was holding it steady. But mirrors don't just reflect light, they also reveal the cracks. Somewhere between likes and shares, the algorithm began to feed not connection, but addiction. Rage spread faster than joy. Lies outperformed truth. The very system designed to unite people was learning that division made them stay longer. And yet, Mark couldn't look away. The numbers were perfect. The world was broken, but the metrics were beautiful. He had built a growth engine with no brakes. Still, he believed. He believed in connection, in progress, in the dream of a unified world. Even as Facebook expanded to billions of users, he insisted it was only the beginning. The journey is 1% finished, the walls of the office read. And in those words was the paradox of his faith, endless growth in a finite world. The algorithm kept growing, learning, consuming. So did the questions. And as Facebook transformed from a startup into a global empire, Mark Zuckerberg, the boy who wanted to understand people, began to realize that the machine he built was starting to understand them too well. The line between creator and creation was blurring, and the code was starting to write the man. By the time Facebook crossed 1 billion users, Mark Zuckerberg had become something rare. A ruler of a kingdom without borders, a sovereign of screens. The empire stretched across continents, languages, and lives. People woke up with Facebook, fell asleep with Facebook, measured their worth in reactions, their memories in timelines. Every click was a whisper of devotion to a god they never saw. And yet the god himself remained silent, watching from behind glass. In the headquarters at Menlo Park, walls were plastered with slogans, "Move fast, be bold." Nothing at Facebook is someone else's problem. It felt less like an office, more like a command center of the digital age. Zuckerberg walked its corridors in the same gray t-shirt and jeans expression, calm voice, flat eyes, always scanning a man not distracted by power, but consumed by it. He was no longer a coder, he was a commander. But in building a world for everyone, he had built a cage for himself. Acquisitions became his weapons. Instagram, the new kingdom of images. WhatsApp, the empire of voices. Oculus, the bridge to new realities. Each purchase was another expansion of control, another territory absorbed into the blue universe. Critics called it monopoly. Mark called it mission. He believed in connection as destiny, a world unified by code, where every person could speak, be seen, belong. Yet the more he connected others, the more isolated he became. He ate lunch with the same quiet intensity he coded with years ago. His circle shrank to engineers, executives, and algorithms. The very people who had once been his friends, Eduardo Sean, were long gone. The lawsuits were settled, the friendships broken. Power demanded solitude, and solitude became normal. He connected everyone, yet he felt connected to no one. Public appearances turned him into myth, a man who blinked, less, smiled rarely, and spoke like a machine explaining feelings. The internet adored him and despised him at once. Some saw a visionary, others a villain. But to Mark, perception didn't matter. Only metrics did. Growth, engagement, expansion, these were his languages now. Still, something had shifted. The boy who once sought understanding was now surrounded by noise he couldn't silence. The feed he built overflowed with anger, misinformation, manipulation, shadows of human nature magnified by his own creation. He watched governments use his tools to influence elections, watched empathy replaced by algorithms trained to amplify outrage. Yet he refused to look away. To stop would mean to accept guilt. And Mark Zuckerberg never stopped. Late nights in the Menlo Park office, he stared at the giant screen showing global activity, billions of glowing dots pulsing across the planet. Connection, motion, life. It looked like a heartbeat. It also looked like surveillance. He had given humanity a new nervous system, but lost his own sense of touch. Inside the empire he built, Mark stood alone, the loneliest connected man on Earth. And as the world bowed to his creation, somewhere in the silence between notifications, a question began to rise. One he could no longer ignore. What happens when the network becomes the world and the man behind it disappears? It began with whispers, then headlines, then hearings. The empire that once promised unity was now accused of tearing the world apart. The same code that connected friends had been used to manipulate voters. The same feed that spread joy had become a weapon of outrage. And the name Facebook no longer meant innovation. It meant power, unregulated, unrestrained, and out of control. In 2018, Mark Zuckerberg walked into the U.S. Capitol face pale under fluorescent light cameras flashing like lightning. Senators questioned him. The world watched. Every answer was rehearsed, measured, defensive. The boy genius from Harvard was now a man defending the morality of his machine. For the first time, he seemed human, nervous, cornered, uncertain. Behind the glass of that hearing room, the architect of connection looked profoundly disconnected. He didn't deny responsibility, but he didn't know how to stop the storm either. Cambridge Analytica had shown the world the truth. Facebook wasn't just a network, it was an influence engine. Data wasn't harmless. It was political, psychological, and profitable. The public turned on him. Lawmakers threatened regulation. Employees questioned purpose. Even users began to ask if the blue icon on their phones was still a friend. For Mark, it was more than a crisis. It was an existential reckoning. The creation he once controlled had outgrown him. The algorithm was no longer following orders, it was following behavior. So he did what he always did when facing chaos. He built something new. A new story, a new universe, the metaverse. In 2021, the world watched as Facebook shed its old skin. The logo changed. The company was reborn as Meta, a bold escape, or perhaps an illusion of rebirth. Mark stood on a digital stage, smiling awkwardly as he presented an alternate reality where workplay and identity could merge into one seamless world. The next frontier, he called it. The future of human connection. But to many it felt like evasion, a billionaire retreating into pixels while the real world burned. Critics mocked his avatars. Investors hesitated. The press called him detached from reality. Yet beneath the ridicule was something deeper, the realization that Mark was once again chasing the same dream he'd had since boyhood, to make human emotion programmable. He no longer wanted to fix the internet, he wanted to replace it. In his vision, people would no longer scroll, they would live inside the screen. Meetings, concerts, love, memory, all reconstructed in 3D code. It was audacious. It was terrifying. It was pure Zuckerberg. But the chaos didn't fade. Facebook's reputation continued to fracture. The empire grew richer, but the man at its center grew colder, a leader turning inward, seeking redemption, not through apology, but through creation. He still believed he was connecting people only now through headsets instead of browsers. And as the real and the virtual began to blur, one truth became impossible to escape. He was no longer just building technology. He was building reality itself. The metaverse was not a correction. It was his confession and his escape. 2 decades after a college experiment rewired the planet, Mark Zuckerberg stands as both architect and anomaly. The man who gave humanity its loudest voice and silenced something within it. His creation outlived its innocence. Facebook became Meta, and Meta became a mirror, reflecting not who we are, but what we've become. Connection, once pure and hopeful, now feels transactional, crowded, and strangely hollow. He is older now, softer in tone, a father raising children in a world his algorithms still define. He speaks of privacy, responsibility, and safety, words that sound less like vision and more like repentance. Yet behind the calm voice remains the same restless current, an unending desire to fix the system by building another one. His philanthropy grows, his statements mature, But his eyes still carry that familiar distance, the look of a man watching humanity through a pane of glass. He dreamed of making the world more open and connected. But openness became exposure, and connection became control. The platforms he built have outgrown intention. They shape politics, influence revolutions, define truth. A single tweak in the algorithm can shift emotions across nations. No emperor in history ever ruled such invisible power or bore such invisible guilt. For every birthday remembered, a lie spreads faster. For every friendship renewed, a conflict deepens. The price of connection is contradiction itself. And yet, for all the criticism, for all the moral chaos, his empire unleashed, one cannot deny the magnitude of what he built. Mark Zuckerberg altered not just how we communicate, but how we exist. We live online, think, and feeds measure belonging through engagement. Humanity's social heartbeat now echoes inside his code. He didn't just create a platform, he created a parallel civilization. Still, somewhere between innovation and isolation lies the question he can never escape. Was it worth it? History will remember him not simply as a billionaire or a technologist, but as a mirror of our age, the embodiment of our hunger for connection, our blindness to its cost. He is both symptom and symbol of a generation that traded intimacy for immediacy, truth for visibility. And as his digital universe expands toward the metaverse, his legacy remains unresolved, suspended between awe and unease. He gave us tools to find each other, but also reasons to forget ourselves. The same code that brought humanity together now defines the boundaries of our solitude. He gave us connection, endless, effortless, addictive. But at what cost? In the quiet hum of the servers that never sleep, the answer lingers, written not in code, but in consequence. Because the story of Mark Zuckerberg isn't just about one man's genius. It's about all of us and the price we paid to never be alone again.